our initiative this past few years has been to bring our design community together. What we noticed was there's some incredible developments in CAD and visualization software. So we thought about creating this education series to help designers advance their tool sets by bringing the makers of the software and the designers together. So we're very lucky to have KeyShot 10 being presented by Kareem today. All attendees can get a 30-day free trial that isn't watermarked. It will be through Garrett, so I will immediately after I do this introduction put in the chat box his email so you can reach out to him and you'll get that license. Additionally, one lucky winner, which we'll draw at the end of this meeting today, will get a one-year free license of KeyShot 10 Pro. So you do need to be present to the end of the meeting. We will do the draw, we'll announce the name, and we need that person to show their face or at least call it that they're here. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Kareem.
All right, I appreciate that introduction, Herman. Thanks for having us here. Let me get the screen up. Excellent. All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to our KeyShot 10 overview. My name is Kareem Merchant. I'm an industrial designer and a creative specialist here at Luxion. And in today's webinar, I'll be kind of walking you through some of the awesome new features introduced in our latest version of KeyShot, as well as some tips and tricks for making the most out of KeyShot while working from home, which many of us are currently doing. Before we get started, I just wanted to put a slide up with some of our resources and contact info. If you have any questions now or in the future, feel free to reach out to myself at kareem@luxion.com or send questions and inquiries to our general info, support, our sales emails, which can be found on this slide, as well as our website, www.keyshot.com. And if you're interested in staying up to date with the latest KeyShot news, releases, and events at Luxion, you can find us through social on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we also have a great forum where you can post questions, show off samples of your work, and get feedback from the community. I also wanted to give a quick plug to our KeyShot 3D YouTube channel. Highly recommend checking that out. It's a great resource for KeyShot quick tips and tutorials and all our latest features. And it's a platform that we regularly update with new content. With that said, let's take a look at some of the topics I'll be covering. I'll touch on some of our larger KeyShot updates, such as RealCloth 2.0, great feature, Keyframe Animation, and collision detection, which I'm excited for. I'll also cover some general improvements to some of our features and UI. And along the way, I'm also going to try and touch on a few of the features and workflows that I found particularly useful while working from home. Like I said, many of us are currently in that situation, so that's always helpful. And of course, we'll run a few demos at the end to give everyone a closer look at some of those features. All right, so first up, RealCloth 2.0. It's still one of my favorite features in the last two versions of KeyShot, and this year it got a serious overhaul. There's a few new processing and UI updates, but most notably the addition of 3D ply geometry. It's significantly increased the realism and believability of the cloth materials in KeyShot. And in KeyShot 10, you can also easily create custom warp and weft fibers using RealCloth 2.0 and the material graph. So that's super useful, and we'll go into that. So what makes RealCloth 2.0 better than traditional RealCloth and KeyShot 9? The big difference, as I mentioned, is the ability to create 3D ply geometry. This is important because although KeyShot 9's RealCloth was really incredibly realistic, it didn't hold up entirely at like really close near to macro camera ranges. And you can see the images on the right on this slide represent the difference between a single-sided ply application, which is how KeyShot 9 functioned at the top, and 3D ply, which you can see in the KeyShot 10 application at the bottom. You'll immediately notice that the macro ranges single-sided ply tends to be a lot flatter. It lacks depth. Like, you're not getting the same effect you would get from a woven material, unlike the results of the 3D ply geometry on the bottom image. Another thing to note is that usage of 3D ply not only creates a more realistic physical representation with the individual threads, but it also creates a surface that's more permeable to light, which significantly increases its believability. So light passes through really easily versus in other versions it does not as well. And you can actually see this illustrated on the previous slide. Let me go back. So there you go. Here you can see a sample of backlit 3D ply application, and you can see how the light passes through gaps between the threads, as well as how it reacts in areas where the cloth is folded over or bunched up. And this model was actually provided to us by Magnus Skogsfjord. Great model for illustrating how RealCloth 2.0 works. And if I'm not mistaken, this scene is available in the KeyShot 10 welcome window as a demo scene. I would recommend checking that out. It's definitely something fun to experiment with, and we have a bunch of different materials applied to it. And quickly, before I move on to the next slide, RealCloth is incredibly useful when you're working with soft goods or products that have soft material inserts or different soft material layers. It generally requires a significant amount of computing power, specifically when you're using 3D ply. So if you're working from home or you're on a computer that's a bit underpowered, don't be afraid to use like 1 ply or 2 ply settings. You'll still get great results. And when the goal is to create renders for like a design review or internal circulation, it'll definitely help speed up your render and turnaround time. Another great update, as I mentioned in RealCloth, is custom warp and weft colors using the material graph. You can easily create custom surface materials while still maintaining the geometry of the actual cloth. And this makes it incredibly easy to create materials like metal meshes or plastic meshes for different products that you're working on. And you can see in the images on the right, it's a close-up of a metal mesh that I created, as well as a screenshot of that same material graph on the bottom here. It's super easy, super quick, looks great, and that's something I'll definitely take a minute to show you guys during our demo portion at the end. It's come in really handy. I've used it on grills. I've used it on, I'll show you in the cloth material before, as well as like strainers and that kind of thing. Some of the other useful additions in KeyShot 10 include a brand new keyframe animation workflow, as well as a few new animation types, which you can see listed on this slide. A huge addition in KeyShot 10's animating capabilities comes in the form of keyframe animation. And keyframe animation allows you to control your geometry's movement with sequences of keyframes, which give you significantly better control over animations. And it also allows you to easily create more complex visuals, which is great when you're animating. And if you're already familiar with using keyframes in other programs, KeyShot 10's keyframe animation should be fairly intuitive and easy for you to jump into. So definitely fun. Another one we have is the sun and sky day arc animation. It's another great animation update added to KeyShot. It allows you to create visuals where the environment's daytime is animated. It's essentially simulating time passing. And it's important to note that this animation works specifically with sun and sky environments. So you'll have to have one of those set, or your background set as sun and sky. And here's a little example on this page of a few screenshots from a sun and sky day arc animation. And you can see that the animation simulates time passing from sunrise to sunset. And not only is there a shift in shadow direction, but you're also seeing a shift in color temperature. So it's really an awesome tool for like architectural and vehicle renderings, but it could definitely help add a new level of realism to a lot of other product applications as well. Maybe some outdoor products or things that would be in an outdoor environment. Also super useful is the new environment rotation animation. This one's pretty straightforward. It lets you rotate the entire environment and add an animation to it, whether you've applied or created that. And it's definitely produced some really quick, eye-catching animations for us, and it was significantly easier and faster to render out than previous methods available to create similar results. Highly recommend giving that one a try if you're looking for a quick, easy way to create some more interesting or dynamic visuals. And last for our animation updates is the camera twist animation. This one lets you add an animation to your camera twist parameter, and it's a great way to quickly add a dynamic movement. Overall, I think the animation updates are pretty significant. And the sun and sky day arc and the environment rotation animation are two easy ways to use animation types to create interesting visuals super quick without a lot of complexity. And that's great when you're under a time crunch or you're just trying to create a quick, interesting visual to circulate internally. All right, so this is another one of my favorite additions in KeyShot 10. It's collision detection. which we just released in 10.1 update. Super excited about collision detection. It's a fantastic feature when you're looking to create easy natural placement of fallen objects. As of now, the collision detection works through the move tool and can be used for staging your scenes for still renders. It currently does not work for animating collisions. It does, however, make staging scenes faster and easier. For example, that Game Boy on my intro image was set up with collision detection, and so are the scattered coffee beans in the image on the right here that you see. And I can tell you from previous experience that setting up those same coffee beans without collision detection is incredibly tedious. It's having that move and rotate each an individual one. It's very time intensive and it can get frustrating. So it's definitely a welcome addition in my book. And if you want to get a closer look at this feature outside of this presentation, we have a collision detection tutorial that covers the feature on our YouTube channel. And there's also a fantastic tutorial recently put up by Will Gibbons covering the feature. His tutorial is about 30 minutes long and it goes in depth about the new feature. And I'll also bring this one up again during the demo portion and give you guys a quick look at how to use that and navigate some of the features UI as well. Oh, yeah, we've actually made quite a few improvements to KeyShot for our 10 and 10.1 releases. I'm not going to go over all of them. I know slide decks get pretty tedious, but there are a few that I definitely want to cover and a few that might come in handy while you're working from home. We've updated our lighting features in KeyShot 10 by adding a new add light menu for physical lighting, as well as adding new light control features. You can now basically add physical lights in a one-step process from the edit menu rather than having to bring in geometry and then apply a lighting material to that geometry. It just speeds things up and makes things a little bit easier. And we've also added light gizmos, which are essentially visual editing tools that can be controlled from the real-time view. And you can see an example of that on the right with our spotlights light gizmo. The spotlight is the most comprehensive light gizmo of all the physical lights. And you can see that all these wireframed elements let you make quick adjustments to parameters like fall off and beam angle, and they kind of illustrate what's happening there for you. And then we also have the light manager that allows you to control your lights from a single panel rather than having to individually select and edit each one from the material tab. I'll demo those features in the end as well. It makes organizing your scene's lighting a lot easier, speeds up the process. And when you're having to jump back and forth between panels, sometimes it gets a little confusing. So that's a great update as well. Now, this is great if you tend to work with clear or translucent materials. It comes in useful when you're working remotely and trying to achieve highly realistic lighting. The update in general improved performance. They increase the speed at which caustics converge on both CPU and GPU, but most notably on GPU, which is important. And it also makes convergence speed less dependent on the overall scene size, so your larger scenes are going to calculate and render faster. And of course, being able to use GPU to render, it allows you to multitask when you're using CPU intensive programs, as well as quickly render when you're using an underpowered CPU. Definitely comes in handy while you're working remote, especially if you're working from like a laptop or something that has a decent GPU on board, but it's a little lacking on the CPU side. So that's one of my tips is when you're working from home, if you have a powerful enough GPU, definitely try to maximize your GPU usage, especially if you're working like SolidWorks or something like that that's taking a lot of CPU power. It's going to let you do multitasking and really accomplish things a lot quicker. And here's an example of the improved caustics I was just talking about using GPU mode. You can see the improvements in caustics through the car's windshield, super noticeable with both rendered at 128 samples. And you can see that the KeyShot 10 rendering on the right is by far the clear winner. The caustics are far more resolved and the windshield looks more similar to what it would actually look like in the real world. So, I mean, that's a big jump, and it's at 128 samples. So it's not like it's a really long render. Definitely useful. Also, on the topic of working from home, two great features are the denoise settings in the image tab and the newly added Firefly Removal tool. Basically, the denoise settings help you smooth out noise in your renders quickly. They do tend to wash out minor details like like fine surface textures. But overall, with a small amount of samples, you can achieve really clean renders. And the newly added Firefly Removal tool, which can be found in the denoise settings, can also help reduce those hotspots and fireflies. Sometimes you can't get them to go away at all, or it tends to require a long time to render those and resolve those. Something to note with this feature, though, is that a little goes a long way. Same with denoise itself. If you use too much of the Firefly Removal effect, it tends to wash out your highlights and you end up losing a lot of that image detail and depth, which you don't want to do. And to give you an idea of what the Firefly Removal tool can do, here we have an image with lots of glass and reflections, and you can see that it's pretty noisy with a fair amount of hotspots and fireflies. This is rendered at 10 samples, so I mean we're talking a super quick render here. And then there is the same scene with 10 samples, but with Firefly filter applied at 0.65. You can see there's like a clear difference in noise, fireflies between the two. But you'll also notice that some of those ridge details in the glass are a bit more washed out, and it's overall a little flatter looking. Again, letting that image res up a little bit will help bring out that detail. But this was just a super quick 10 sample render as an example. I mean, we're talking like under a minute render here, but I'll just jump back and forth real quick so you guys can see the difference there. So, you know, when you're on an underpowered computer, this lets you crank out some quick renders. I mean, I've used this when we're talking about like VDBs and smoke going around, and it's you know what would have taken an hour without denoise took 10 minutes with denoise. So I would maximize denoise. Don't use too much of it, but it'll definitely help you crank out renders faster. And then I wanted to briefly touch on our new smart exports that we've added in KeyShot 10. Essentially, they refer to a group of export file types that use UV unwrapping and baking to prep your scenes. They can prep them for augmented reality, mobile, and 3D print applications. They include two new export file types, USDZ and 3MF, and we've also updated our GLB GLTF format exporter. However, I do want to highlight two in particular. The first is the USDZ USD exporter. USDZ is essentially a zipped version of a USD file. It contains mesh, binary, and texture data for augmented reality and makes visualizing objects in augmented reality extremely quick and very easy. And if you're an Apple user on device with iOS 12 and above, you should be able to quickly preview those USD files using the built-in AR Quick Look. Unfortunately, Android devices currently have no native support, but you can always experiment with like third-party viewers and see how they work for you. It's definitely another feature that I think can make working in remote teams or with development partners elsewhere a lot easier. It lets you quickly send rendered iterations of design concepts or colorways and lets that person on the receiving end open it up without actually having KeyShot. And then it lets them actually look up in close and personal in their immediate environment. You can kind of rotate around it, stand over it, zoom in. So it gives you a better look at what that object might look like when it's actually prototyped in the real world. It's super useful, especially under the current circumstances. And finally, another one of my favorites, the last of the smart export updates is the addition of 3MF. Definitely one of my favorite updates, actually, because who doesn't love rapid prototyping? Also known as 3D manufacturing format, 3MF creates a file with both your 3D model and data like dimensions, colors, textures, and materials, and they can be exported and saved together. So if you're looking to make prototyping significantly easier and significantly faster, it's definitely the export format you're going to want to start working with. We've been experimenting with the full color printing using the 3MF files on our in-house J55 from Stratasys. And I gotta say, it's pretty mind-blowing the kind of results we're getting straight out of KeyShot. Full color, full texture. It's even clear, suspending bubbles in clear substrates. It's pretty cool. It's definitely an incredibly useful tool to have at your disposal, especially during the current circumstances. And if you have access to color printers in-house or locally, you can reduce the time it takes to go from concept to prototype using 3MF. And I did want to touch on one material specifically before jumping into our demo section, and that material is Toon material. So Toon is, in my opinion, a highly underrated material since the goal with Toon is not to create photoreal images. Basically, it allows you to create stylized renderings that consist of outlines and fill colors. So using Toon materials, they can be a great way to create like engineering-based images, instructional drawings, graphics for packaging or orthos, and using Toon materials for design comps can also be an extremely useful way to communicate design intent and not get too caught up in materials and textures when you're early on in a project. So, it's quick. There's not a lot that you have to worry about. And again, if you're trying to just get the point across and look at some colorways, that's a great way to do it as well. And Toon also happens to be one of the features we've updated in KeyShot 10. The main difference between this version and the previous versions is the materials outline behavior, which has been improved to be more, consistent with like a traditional line drawing weight and shading. You can see on the right here an example of a Toon material being used in KeyShot 9 at the top versus that same material rendered in KeyShot 10 on the bottom. There's a big difference. The two, it's clear that the KeyShot 10 rendering on the bottom demonstrates a more realistic representation of what a line drawing would look like. And on that note, I'm going to jump into KeyShot 10 so we can take a look at some of those features I've highlighted, and then we can get some Q&A going here at the end. So let's start with RealCloth. All right, so this is that file I was talking about that's in the welcome window. You can open it up. We have a bunch of different, drop that out here. So we have a bunch of different materials under the multi-material generally. I've deleted most of those in this case just so I can kind of show off what's going on here. But the big difference that I noted was like one-sided, two-sided versus 3D ply, which is our KeyShot 10 version. So if you actually look here, let me kind of get a well-lit area and you can see the split ends. This is 3D ply, and you can already start seeing while it's rezzing up that there's actual dimensionality to the threads. Like even the ends of these threads, you can see they finish off in cylinders. So it's not like it's faking a three-dimensional material. It is three-dimensional. This is as close to cloth as you're going to get in digital form. And you can see the flyaways coming off of here. So it really brings up the level of what cloth looks like when you're working in KeyShot. And especially for soft goods designers, furniture designers or vehicle designers that are trying to create that material on their seats or whatnot, what have you. But it's a really versatile and useful material. And just like in previous versions, you can customize it. The edit weave pattern menu is a pro feature, so you have to have pro to be able to use it. But we did pull out the weave pattern into a drop down over here. So you can kind of run through a couple of preset weave patterns that produce different effects. There is the ability to customize a lot of the different elements in the properties of that material. And then if you kind of come over here to the geometry, that's where you're going to find your single-sided, two-sided, and 3D ply. And as you can see right there, I just had a tooltip pop up. Super useful if you're ever confused or you want to know more about something when you're running through KeyShot. Just hover over, and generally a quick tip or a tooltip will pop up and give you kind of an insight as to what that element is controlling or what it does. So if you're ever feeling lost, definitely do that. I'm going to see if this will handle going between single-sided and 3D ply. Oh, and one thing to remember is when you're playing with the geometry in something like RealCloth, you need to execute your geometry nodes so that it can kind of recalculate how that geometry works. And especially with the flyaways, you can kind of see all these little loose errant hairs on the surface. If you start playing with that and you start changing the density or the length, you're going to have to execute your geometry nodes for it to change. All right, and same with the scale of the actual weave, because now it's going to have to recalculate where those flyaways are coming from. So you definitely got to execute. It'll go through its little setup process. And in this case, you can see the difference. Now this is single ply. This is how it looks in KeyShot 9. And essentially, a good way to think about how this works is single-sided is like having a piece of paper with a fake cloth that's put on top of it. And you're looking at the cloth side, right? So it's like on top of a substrate. And you can kind of actually see that going on right here, where this is where the normals are pointing and this is not. And so there's a big difference in how those surfaces look, right? So if it was something that was enclosed where you weren't actually going to see it, it wouldn't matter so much. But if it's, in this case, something that's two-sided, you're going to definitely notice it. And then we have our two-sided ply. So I'll go ahead and execute my geometry nodes again. And two-sided looks very similar, but basically now you have normals on both sides. So you can think of this as that piece of paper with the RealCloth on one side, but it's also sandwiched by another piece on the other side. And you can see flyaways are coming from both sides here. So that, again, that's very much how KeyShot 9 worked. Two-sided is more of a KeyShot 10 thing. And you can actually click the transparency, which will give you a little bit of transparency, but it's nothing compared to 3D ply geometry. They all look great, but 3D ply geometry really sets it off. It's just, in my opinion, it's just absolutely incredible what's happening when you're using 3D ply. So I'll go ahead and go back to that real quick. And then I'll jump over to that mesh workflow I was talking about. But yeah, it's awesome. It's definitely computer intensive, like I said. So single-sided and two-sided are something that's going to help you speed that up if you're kind of on an underpowered machine. But I absolutely love RealCloth 2.0 and 3D ply. So yeah, and this is another reason. So let's take a look at the metal mesh that I created. So I mean, I actually made this material for Satoshi style grill on a Tacoma, but I put it on here. Come on, let's see if it reses up. Yeah, so I mean, it's like a wire mesh. You can change the scale. It's the same thing as RealCloth essentially, because you can create custom meshes and alter all those things. And actually, I should show you that because I did not show you that a second ago. Let me jump back to the other one real quick to show you how to make those custom meshes. So basically, when I mentioned the weave pattern is going to be how you change your weave. But if you go to your edit menu, again, a pro feature, you're going to have a little bit more control over what's going on inside of your actual mesh. And then this little image in the center, you can actually interact with. So you can click on different warp and weft threads and start making custom patterns to whatever you need. You can control the width, the tension, you can go from ribbon to round, and then you can make custom warp and weft counts. So, if you're depending on the mesh you're making, you can really, the sky's the limit. It's all about creativity and what you can do there. Awesome feature. But let's jump back over to the metal mesh because that's exactly what I did to create this type of mesh. And so I'll show you how to make that right now. So basically, let's open up the material graph. Oh, and this is a new feature too. Before you could align your nodes in your work area. So that's been updated and it's less chaotic and messy. It kind of segregates each individual one so that you don't have to keep jumping over them. Awesome update, but even better, now you can lock down a single one so you don't have to see everything else, and that shows only the active material you're on. But okay, so let's go back to the other one so I can show you the difference. Oop. There we go. So basically what's happening here, this is our RealCloth material, the last one I showed you, and our RealCloth is attached to our surface. So this is a piece of RealCloth. Basically, to create a mesh of any kind, you want to use RealCloth's geometry rather than its material. So all I've done in this case is I've attached the RealCloth to the geometry node instead of the surface node, so that I'm using that to drive the geometry. And then I can grab whatever material I want and put it on there, and then that surface is going to reflect that material. So like maybe let me get like a red plastic or something to show you how that works. Let's use that blue plastic since KeyShot's blue. So I'm gonna let me move that to the side so you can kind of see what's going on here. So I'm going to pull that off of the surface node, and immediately it goes blue. It's losing that surface information. But if I pull in that blue plastic and then I attach it to my surface, it's going to weave, it's going to set up again, and now you have a plastic mesh that has the characteristics of the material. So it's super easy. You can just jump back and forth, customize your colors, and really, achieve whatever you're trying to achieve in a really short time. So it's much faster than trying to do that, with procedurals or even RealCloth in the previous versions. So it's a versatile material. It's definitely one of my favorites. And I definitely recommend you guys play around with that, if for no other reason to explore, because it's super cool. So I'm going to go ahead and pause that, and we're going to go talk about another one that I really like, which is collision detection. All right, so collision detection. So there's kind of three components to collision detection. You can kind of see right here, I have a mug and some pens and pencils. And the idea is I want to put these pens and pencils into the cup, and I don't want to have to sit there and fiddle with each individual one and try to make it so that it's not, colliding with each other or there's overlapping. I want it to look natural, right? So I'm going to actually click on the mug first to give you an idea of how our basic collision detection works. So here we go. Here's our move tool. Under the advanced accordion is where you're going to find the collision settings, which are at the bottom here. I'm going to uncheck that. But so we have our collision, and basically what collision is going to do is it's going to let me detect where there's objects, and it's going to prevent that from passing through. So whether it's the ground plane, an object to the side, if you're trying to place objects in a scene, you don't really have to worry about that overlapping. You just move it, it's going to find that object, it's going to collide, and that's that. There's no worries about it. So that in and of itself is really useful. It's kind of like how the snap to ground or snap to lower object works. But the settle is two components. You have settle, which settles the parts as a whole, and then settle as parts. When you click that checkbox, it breaks things up. So let me show you settle first using these guys right here. So yeah, you basically, like in the situation with those coffee beans I would take those coffee beans and then I would just use this and I drop it onto the ground, and then they'd move around and settle very naturally in comparison to if you're sitting there having to do them individually. So collision, oh, I think the mug is selected. Hold on 1 second. Bam. Okay, so maybe if I click one of them. Settle. All right, so that illustrates the idea right there. I'll go ahead and Control Z that and do it again. So settle, it basically drops, and you can see that the screen is kind of wonky, and that's because it's continuing to settle. So at any point in time, once your object is settled, you can go ahead and click the real-time view and it'll stop, and that object is just going to stop right there, and so I really want to get all these to drop so you can see them move around. Okay, perfect. So yeah, so that's basically what you're trying to do. You're trying to settle multiple parts, and you don't want to have to deal with the hassle of moving those individual parts. And as you can see, they're propped up against the sides of the inside of this thing. They've recognized the bottom of the cup, and I didn't have to sit there and play around with each individual one. So it's really quick and super useful. I love that feature. I'm going to show you the as parts real quick, not with that model. I'm going to use a toy airplane that I have set up here. And this is actually one of our models from our cloud library, which I can show you in a second here. So basically, here's our toy airplane. There's not a lot of parts to it, so it should be pretty quick to calculate on the settle with the as parts. I'm going to go ahead and select that airplane and do the same thing I did before. I'm going to make sure collision is checked, but this case, I'm going to hit the as parts. And again, you saw that tooltip pop up, gives you a little idea what's going on here. So when I hit OK, or when I hit settle in this case, you're going to see it break up in all its individual components. So if you're trying to show something that's broken or the pieces, it just does an incredible job of just breaking that up. And you can see, like, this isn't an incredibly powerful computer that I'm working on right now, and you saw how fast that happened. And here you go. This is where it's at right here. You can see how it's made contact with this, and it looks pretty close to I didn't have to do anything, and it looks like it's sitting on there, and it doesn't look like it's intersecting. It's a super useful feature. I absolutely love this. So definitely something to play around with. Brand new to KeyShot 10.1. I think we got like a minute or two here, so I'm just going to quickly show you the cloud library. So the cloud library, you got your materials, you have environments, backplates, textures, and models. I got that airplane model from our model section. There are probably hundreds of models at this point in here. So these are all really great when you're just trying to experiment and you want something quick that's already got materials on it. You want to work with lighting, or when you're trying to stage a scene. There's the Game Boy concept that I used for the images in the front. You'll actually see a lot of these. This is the KeyShot Essentials camera during our Essentials series. We use these during some of our actual tutorials and quick tips, just so you guys can kind of jump in here and follow along using the same models. But this, in my opinion, is an invaluable resource. All the materials in here, they're constantly being updated. There's tons of materials. We got a bunch from Simona Boltron, who makes aerospace materials for like airplane seating and stuff. So if you like mold text, this is great materials to use. And these are constantly being updated with user-generated materials as well. If you post them up there, they go through a approval process and they get put up here too. So many of these are made by users that are using KeyShot on a regular basis. But awesome. I love it. I definitely recommend you guys checking it out. And I'm going to pass it back to Herman here in a moment, but I did want to put this slide back up if you missed it at the beginning. As I mentioned, you can reach out to us anytime through the emails listed here or on our website. I do encourage everyone to check out our social media platforms and definitely our KeyShot 3D YouTube channel. We have a ton of learning content posted there for all the features I've covered here today, as well as a bunch of others. We have quick tips and tutorials, and depending on how in-depth you want to go into that feature. We also have the 12-part Essential series, which you saw the camera that I pointed to, and that covers KeyShot basics from install all the way to final render, including animation. So if you're new to KeyShot or you're rusty, it's been a while, and you want to get some like a general overview of the entire program, I'd highly recommend giving that a watch. And on that note, I will pass it back over to Herman to shout out any Q&A questions you guys might have, and I will do my best to answer them.
Wow, Kareem, thank you so much. When we created the title on Really Real, after you presented all these features, definitely we stick to that name. And definitely after this, I'll be dropping a bunch of designs to the Settle tool. All right, so we're going to spend 10 minutes doing a Q&A, but we do want to leave 5 minutes prior to 1 to announce the winner for the draw of the 1-year license. How we will do this is I guess much like the other Q&As, where if you want to type in the chat box your question, great. Also, if you want to just show your face and speak up, all good too.
One thing, if you don't mind bringing up your KeyShot and then bring up the render window real quick, Kareem, I can kind of talk a little bit about some of the questions about kind of the GPU versus CPU rendering. So if you go under options in here, so we did add GPU rendering for KeyShot 9, and so people asked a lot about that. What essentially allows you to do is you can you see the GPU button up in the ribbon there. You can operate in GPU mode on the actual application itself. So KeyShot can use GPU or CPU. The other option you have is actually to send a job to the GPU in the background, for example, that background tab. So you actually have something rendering on the GPU in the background while you're still working on the CPU in the foreground. And this also, people often ask for, if you're on a Mac, why you can't have GPU rendering. It's because the Apple doesn't actually support NVIDIA anymore. It's an issue between NVIDIA and Apple. But what you could do is have, for example, a GPU system on Windows that would be sort of a render box, if you will, and then send the job from your Mac over to that GPU via our network rendering capabilities. So if you're not familiar with it, KeyShot has network rendering, so you can actually have a render farm that you can send your jobs to. So that way you're rendering while working. One person's asking is the ability to animate the collision simulations. Yes, that's we just add the collision detection in 10.1. That's kind of a first cut, and so the idea is to build on that for more physics in future versions. I can't commit to when that will happen, but that is on the roadmap. Does KeyShot have a UV option now as well? Yeah, if you can go up to the tools menu. So as Kareem mentioned, the smart export, one of the things that you need UV unwrapping for a lot of things like USDZ export. So within smart export, we've made it so that you automatically UV unwrap and bake as part of the export process. Inside of the tools view, you can also actually do manual UV unwrapping. So this allows you to do a quick unwrap, which is sort of the top menu, which is sort of where we basically automatically calculate what the UVs should be. That works a lot of times. Sometimes for more complex scenes, you'll need to manually go through and do the unwrapping. And so in there, you can go and add seams and do a flood fill, and then just manually unwrap that. As Kareem mentioned, there's a good YouTube video explaining that in more detail. For all of our features, as Kareem mentioned, you can kind of dig in on our YouTube channel and get more detail. Just going through, do you know when the Creo plugin will support multi-bodies to import into KeyShot properly? I'm actually not sure about that one. That's to Luke. I can follow up with you directly on that one and figure out if that's an issue on our side or on the Creo side. Sometimes it's a function of what's exposed in the APIs. Just going through here. How much better is using a Quadro versus an RTX? So a big question people have for GPUs is what the differences are. Essentially, if you buy the Quadro or the NVIDIA branded version, that means that NVIDIA themselves have actually manufactured the card to their specifications. The other way is a third-party card where it still has the same NVIDIA chip, but the actual board itself may be different. So it really comes down to, from a performance standpoint, they're generally going to be the same. It really comes down more to, if you're buying the Quadro from NVIDIA, that's going to be sort of officially supported by NVIDIA. But you should see the same for performance either way. And actually, it reminds me, I will put this in the chat window right now. We have a benchmark tool that we have in KeyShot, so you can actually go and run on your current system and see how fast you're running KeyShot versus a baseline system, and that also will tell you how much faster things like a GPU are. So that's a good way for people who are curious about how to get more power and performance out of KeyShot. That benchmark tool can help you do that. And that's also part of our KeyShot viewer. So if you don't know, we have a free KeyShot viewer that allows you to share files. It's a great way to do design reviews with clients or customers, where you can actually just send them a password-protected KeyShot file and they can review that. Someone's asking on tune passes. You're saying, so I think someone's saying the tune passes, the line weight looks different in the final render than what they're seeing on their screen. Any settings or tips to help this? We did make some changes to the tune shader in 10. So I don't know if you're seeing that, Joe Bloomfeld. I don't know if you're seeing that on 9 or on 10, but I would try and get the 10 version. You can get that free trial, that non-watermark free trial if you don't already have it, and check that out. And if it's not matching the real-time versus the render view, that sounds like it could be a bug. So please file that with our support team. Just so you know, our support is located in the U.S. and in Europe. We have phone support, we have email support, and forum support. So we have a very responsive support team if you have kind of issues where things are not matching what your expectations would be. Just looking real quick, ability to subdivide geometry. We are working on some geometry tools in KeyShot, things like mesh simplification, and so that's something we're definitely looking at. It's been kind of on the wish list for folks, but yeah, I'll definitely kind of add that note. I also have the note regarding the glare filter, which is very interesting.
There's a question about a new subsurface scattering material. We didn't add any new ones to 10, did we?
Sorry, yeah, I didn't say it. Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay.
I don't know what that would be in reference to. Yeah.
The plastics and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We added some to we added the cloudy plastics in 9, but there's been nothing in 10. Where can I watch the recording? Yeah, will you guys be posting this after it's done on
Well, so yes, we'll be posting it through IDSA Seattle on our YouTube channel, as well as we'll have it up on Facebook. Usually takes about a day or two, and we'll get that up and we'll share the links.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, maybe we can move on to the giveaway.
Sounds great. Thank you. Okay, cool. So we've got 53 people. We had 56. So Ginger, do you want to do the draw and announce?
Yeah,
one?
let me pull up my little Excel sheet here. Boop, boop, boop. Dun, da, da, da.
Big drum rolls, big fanfare, everything big.
Is there a Rachel Wolniak in the crowd?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh my god!
Yay!
Ooh.
I also put up in the chat box the free 30-day trial. I want to thank again the whole crew, the KeyShot team. Kareem, you did an amazing job showing definitely the features. I really like the AR capability. I love that you dove into detail about that because I was really curious about how to do AR. Yeah, fantastic. I definitely also, a lot of things passed my head, so I'm really glad someone mentioned, is this on YouTube? Because there's a lot of a lot of information, and also knowing that KeyShot has a YouTube channel to jump to. I think the only other thing I wanted to say then is this is the first in the series, right? And what we're doing at IDSA Seattle is the next partnership is with Rhino. And we're working with them to have a two-part series, one based on CAD modeling and the other also based on visualization. So that should come in the coming next 2 months. And would love your, like, everyone's participants' feedback or even like input of what they want to see through that series. So we'll probably be emailing out through the Eventbrite what you emailed us through the Eventbrite. Otherwise, I think we are, well, we're golden.